Bonjour, French 101 students. I hope you're all doing well. We've made it through the first week of classes, right? Whether your classes are online or face-to-face, I hope that they've been going well, and I hope you feel settled into everything and we're ready to attack the rest of the semester. So as I promised you in the second video, this time we're moving on to the last topic in what we call compétence 1. So you will see if we take a look at our course syllabus, our course calendar, the first two videos looked at Le Monde Francophone. That was the first one, so looking at French and how it's spoken around the world, different countries where people speak French. We also looked in our second video at Les Formules de Politesse, so salutations formelles, formal ways of greeting other people, and then here in our third video, we'll be looking at les salutations familières. You can probably guess the meaning of familière. It's very similar to familiar in English, right? So we'll see lots and lots of vocabulary that really mirrors what we already know in English. And up to something like 50% of our vocabulary in English actually has origins in French, because the English and the French have lots of historical connections. So we ended up borrowing a lot of vocabulary from French, and it stays with us to this day. Okay, so let's head over to looking at this page from the textbook. This would be page 8, and you can see the French number down here, so that's a good way to remind yourself about that. We'll be learning numbers soon enough, but we would call that la page 8. 8, if you want to repeat it for yourself. Okay, so on this page, we're going to start with the cultural note, la note culturelle. And as it tells us there, when people greet one another in France, they usually shake hands or exchange a brief kiss on each cheek called a bise. And I want you to notice with this word bise right here, B-I-S-E, this is the French word for kiss, and you might notice that the S in the middle of that word just kind of sounds like a Z does in English. So we'll notice as we go through different topics in the next weeks of the semester that sometimes in French, S sounds like we know it in English, like S, but sometimes it sounds like Z, and this is a case where it sounds like Z, as in the word bise. So it's kind of interesting to note that in French-speaking countries, in France for sure, when people greet each other, they often do it with kisses. And that will differ from one part of the country to the other. So in certain parts of the country, people give each other 2 kisses. In some parts of the country, people give each other 4 kisses. So it's a very different way of greeting each other than we might experience here in the United States. And I think I mentioned in the second video that the first time I experienced that, it was like, whoa! It was definitely a new experience for me as an American. But you do get used to it pretty soon, pretty quickly. Okay. Underneath that, there's a box that says Note de vocabulaire. So we can guess that means a vocabulary note. We're learning something about new vocabulary here. And here in this box, it describes the difference between 2 words for you in French. And if you've studied Spanish or any other similar language like Italian or even Romanian is in the same family of languages, that there are different words or 2 different ways of saying you. And it depends on who you're addressing. So in French, we use the word tu with friends or family, people that you know well. The other word vous you use with people in a more formal situation, maybe your boss, maybe your professor, maybe someone who's older than you. And so it really depends on the relationship that you have with that person. And I experienced firsthand when I spent some time in France that it's really important to use the correct one. If you address someone as tu and they're supposed to be a vous, they may not like it very much. So it's really important to get that right and to kind of make a good judgment about which one you should use. You also might notice that there's a little difference in pronunciation with those 2 sounds. TU, the U, is a very distinct sound in French. We don't have that sound in English. It sounds like U, and it's a whole lot different than the U we use in English. The other word vous kind of sounds like a double O, like in the word food in English. So these are two really different sounds. And because the U in the word tu is so different from what we might have in English, I thought it would be a good idea to play a quick video clip for you that I found that I think explains the pronunciation of this sound really clearly. In fact, it's the way I learned to pronounce this sound.
Bonjour et bienvenue sur ma chaîne. Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Cindy and today I'm going to teach you how to pronounce the French letter U. U. I actually found this tip in one of my OU courses, the Open University courses, and it's kind of funny because the course was actually about English, so nothing to do with French. I don't even know what it was doing in there, but there was actually a very good tip in there which I think you may find useful to pronounce the French letter U. U. So what you need to do is pronounce the English word T, and as you hold the vowel sound, then close your lips. T, like this. Hang on, because you do feel like a bit of a plonker doing this, but if you know where, like how your mouth needs to be positioned in order to pronounce it, you'll then eventually be able to produce this sound without actually having to go through the exercise, because you will know where that sound comes from in your mouth, if that makes sense. So, T, U, U, T, U, 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 U. Repeat. T, U, U, U. I advise you to practice this exercise as often as it takes to actually feel in your mouth where the letter U comes from, or where the sound U comes from. But I'm sure you've already got it. So this is it for today's lesson. À la prochaine. Bye.
Okay, so as you could see, I think that's a really, really helpful way of practicing that sound. So if you start, like she said, by saying the word tea, like drinking a cup of tea, and then take your lips and make them as round into the tightest little circle that you can. So you go from tea to, and that's how you pronounce that sound. So I will post that video separately in the chapitre préliminaire folder, so that way you can practice it on your own, you can practice it separately. And I'll actually offer a little challenge for bonus points that I'll tell you about this Sunday in my Sunday night announcement. I'm going into next week, so stay tuned for that. But it's a really good idea to start practicing that sound as often as you can, because it's a really, really important sound in the French language. Another word that you'll see here in the vocabulary note is salut, and you will notice that it is the very same U sound. So we need it not only for the pronoun tu, but also for the greeting, the informal greeting salut. So it's a way of saying hi, and it's a way of saying bye in French. So if you're speaking to people that you know well, that are your friends, you can easily greet them using this word salut. Okay, so another thing that they do mention is the word plus or plus, depending on where and how you're using it. They mention that the final S of plus is pronounced in an expression like à plus, which means like, see you later, or à plus tard. In this case, the S is not pronounced because a word that begins with a consonant follows right after it. So it's good to know how those two different expressions are pronounced. So what we can do next is look at a couple of expressions in vocabulaire supplémentaire, so supplementary vocabulary, and you will see. You saw these expressions actually in the formal conversations from last time in the second video, and now you'll see some of these more informal expressions in these new dialogues that we see here in this third video. So instead of asking comment vous appelez-vous, like you would ask somebody's name in a formal conversation, now we're going to ask them in a less formal way, an informal way. So comment t'appelles-tu? or comment tu t'appelles. Okay, so you can repeat those after me to practice your pronunciation. So comment t'appelles-tu or comment tu t'appelles. Okay, so these are familiar ways of asking someone's name. The next expression you see here is comment vas-tu? So again, we're rounding our lips a whole lot to get that French U pronunciation. Comment vas-tu? Hey, you often see me if you've sent me an email recently to ask for help with MindTap or something else related to the course. You might have noticed that I signed off with à bientôt, which just means see you soon. So it's a nice greeting until you see or speak to the person the next time. The next one you'll see here is à tout à l'heure. So see you later, probably the same day. And the next one you'll see is common not only in French, but in Spanish and Italian. People often use this expression, ciao. My husband is a Spanish speaker, and we use it all the time in our house and with his family. We often say ciao when we say goodbye to each other. Hey, you might also see in some of the emails that I've exchanged with you, I might have told you bon weekend. So if I sent you an email today, I was probably wishing you a good weekend. So in this case, it would be bon weekend. Bon weekend. And finally, the last expression you see there is another one for have a good day, and that's bonne journée. Bonne journée. And what this expression means is, you know the greeting bonjour already, which also means hello. It's a general greeting. Bonne journée refers to the whole day. So journée, jour is day. Journée means the whole day. So if you tell somebody bonne journée, it means you're wishing them a great day for the entire day. And it's a common greeting as well, or maybe a way to kind of say goodbye to somebody. Okay, so we'll take a listen to some of these greetings that we just heard in the dialogues that we see here. These are informal dialogues between two students, maybe running into each other on campus. So you'll get a sense of how another person will say this, maybe a native French speaker.
Salut Pierre, ça va?
Salut Juliette, ça va? Et toi, comment ça va?
Pas mal.
Okay, so you notice they're using that informal greeting, salut, salut. This is a good one to practice that French U sound with. The other expression you see here that is essential for any French conversation, especially informal conversations, would be ça va. And this literally means like it goes, or that goes. But in informal lingo, it just means how are you? Ça va? And you notice that the other speaker responds with the same thing. So he says, salut Juliette, ça va? So you can ask ça va to ask how somebody is doing, but the other person also responds by saying ça va, which means that things are going well. So he says, or she says, salut Pierre, ça va? And then he responds with salut Juliette, ça va? Et toi, comment ça va? So he's asking her, how's it going for you? And then she says, pas mal. So not bad. Okay, a pretty typical conversation we might have with people we know well. All right, let's give this second conversation a listen here.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Pauline. Et toi, tu t'appelles comment?
Moi, je m'appelle Lucas. Je suis de Lyon. Et toi, tu es d'où?
Moi, je suis d'ici.
Okay, so bonjour, we already know that pretty well. That's a greeting that's used in formal and informal contexts. We probably have already seen je m'appelle. So je m'appelle literally just means I am called, or my name is. Je m'appelle Pauline. Hey, et toi, and you, tu t'appelles comment? Oh, how are you called, or what is your name? Okay, moi, so me, je m'appelle Lucas. And notice that the S is silent at the end of this name. So keep in mind those consonants at the ends of words that are often pronounced. Remember the kind of the memory device careful, C, R, F, and L are consonants that we pronounce, but S is generally silent. So his name is Lucas. Okay, je suis de Lyon. So, je suis is one you can memorize from now on. It means I am. And you'll hear this all the time from here on out. So, je suis de Lyon. So, I am from Lyon, which is kind of like the second largest city in France. Okay, et toi, tu es d'où? So, tu es d'où literally means you are from where. So, he's asking her where she's from. Okay, moi, je suis d'ici. So, I am from here. Okay, so these are some of the kind of expressions you would see in an informal conversation. And for the oral presentation that's coming up in a couple of weeks, you'll have the option of choosing between recording a formal presentation or an informal presentation. So either the dialogues that you see here in Les Salutations Familières or the Salutations Formelles from the second video, you can practice either set of dialogues, whichever one is more comfortable for you and your partner. Okay. So let's see, going into Mind Tap, just to kind of make a connection from what we see here to what you're practicing in the exercises. So everything up to the second to last exercise goes along with either the first video or the second video. This last exercise, this conversation practice, goes with the topic we are addressing in this video, which is about informal conversations. So here, you're going to be looking at conversations in which friends and classmates meet and greet each other, and then you'll complete the conversation using informal words and phrases you've learned in this section. So right here, all you have to do is click on Review It, and you can review Les Salutations Familières, Prononciation, and kind of looking again at Les Salutations Familières. So it's good to kind of connect this all together. Okay, it's also good to start taking a look at the pronunciation of different vowels. So it's les voyelles A, E, I, O, U. And that's how we pronounce our vowels in French. So as you see, they give you different examples of vowels in French, and one of them actually has an accent mark, which is the E right here. But in general, this vowel right here in French is pronounced as A. So we have example words like A, ça, va, madame, mal, assez. So they all have the same sound. This next vowel that we see here is pronounced like kind of like the vowel sound in the word good in English. So these would be je, ne, que, de, demain, devoir. So all of them have that sound Okay, this next vowel is e. So some examples would be café, pâté, bébé, été, préféré, répété. Okay, and the next vowel we see here is E. It's not the E that we would know from English. We would call this I in English, but in French it's pronounced as E. So some example words would be quiche, idéal, Paris, machine, six, merci. Merci will be a great word to get into your vocabulary right away. It means thank you. Okay, then we have the vowel sound O, as in words like bientôt, vélo, hôtel, kilo, mot, trop. And notice the R. We'll be learning about the R a little bit later. But the R sound in French is basically like a sound that's all the way back in your throat, kind of like a but you'll learn more about that sound later. Okay, the last sound that we just learned about and we featured in this video was the French U sound U. So you can practice lots of good words with this sound, and as I said, Next week, you'll have a chance to complete an activity for a couple of bonus points with either this sound or kind of another similar challenge. Okay, so we have tu, salut, Luc, super, du, université. Okay, so there's lots of good words to practice the French U sound with. Okay, so I think that's enough pronunciation material for us there. The last thing I'm going to mention before we sign off on this video is remember the tu and vous distinction I talked about in the beginning? I'm going to show you kind of a cool website that I found that sort of looks at the history of this usage of you in English. Now, we're learning about tu and vous in French, but was English always this way with only having one form of you? It turns out that it wasn't. We had two different yous in English too. So as it shows us here, it talks about the difference between thou and you in Shakespeare's time. So modern English has only one second person pronoun, which is you. So it seems really easy, right? We can kind of figure out how to speak to people formally and informally based on context. But Old English actually had two forms. So thou was for second person singular and you for second person plural. But by the 13th century, people began employing you as a singular pronoun to convey politeness or formality. And this is the amazing thing about language, is that language is always changing. It depends on what's going on in the culture. It depends on people's attitudes, beliefs, relationships with each other. If a language isn't changing, it's not alive anymore. And we, of course, know that English is a living language spoken by lots of people. So lots of changes have occurred in English over time. So it's really interesting to see that back in Shakespeare's time, early modern English, thou and you could indicate these different distinctions of social status and relationships. So thou was the informal form. People would use it to address their social inferiors, people of a lower class, maybe in very private or familiar situations, or even to show scorn or contempt. Very interesting. You was actually the more elevated form. It would be used to talk to superiors, people of the upper class, maybe in public, where people were expected to be more formal. To express formality, neutrality, or even to show respect and admiration. And so it's interesting to see that thou you would use to, talk to your very closest friends, maybe people who were ranked below you, like maybe a teacher to a student, a king to a subject. As it says here, the hierarchical use of thou made it an excellent way to put someone in their place, to be condescending or insulting to them. So if you called someone thou, you were basically putting them down in some way. But it could also express intimacy too. So close friends, romantic partners, husbands and wives, they would use thou to address each other. And even if you were talking to God, praying to God, you might use thou to show your closeness to God. So I do find this to be really fascinating, and that this word you that we use all the time and don't think anything of it, this was the more formal form. So we're actually speaking in a formal way in some way, even though this is the most common thing ever to us as English speakers. So I thought that was kind of an interesting historical note. Okay, so I think that wraps up everything for our third video for Compétence 1. And just to give you a preview of what's coming up next week we're still going to be in Chapitre Préliminaire, but we're going to be looking at Compétence 2, or Competence 2, and then moving on to Compétence 3, so the third competence. Compétence can also mean skill, so we're going to be looking at a few new skills. So les nombres, so we're going to be learning numbers in French. We'll also be looking at les jours de la semaine, so the days of the week. We'll also be looking at time. L'heure just means the hour, the time. A couple of other things to note coming up for next week is you'll still be working on MindTap exercises, and as you look in MindTap, notice as you scroll down we'll head back over here. You can look at the different weeks as they're coming up. So week 2, August 24th to August 30th, you'll have 15 activities due, and they're all listed there. So you know exactly what's coming up for next week. And in case you didn't notice, you can actually toggle between 2 different views. You have your week by week view here. Over here, you have kind of the chapter view. So you can expand and see which activities are due in a certain section of the chapter by looking at the different competences. I personally think it's much easier to look at the week by week view so you know exactly what you need to do in a certain week. And I'll always show you which MindTap activities go with which skills in the videos that I send to you. Okay, so going back over here to the calendar, you'll have the MindTap activities, and remember that the first cultural discovery or découverte culturelle is going to be due by Friday, August 28th. So go ahead and look in the folder for that in Blackboard, see what your first task is going to be. Those projects are done in English. They're just a way for you to explore different aspects of French culture. So you're learning about culture at the same time you're learning about language. Okay, so we'll stop for there this time. Look out for another kind of video or announcement on Sunday evening that will prepare you for what's coming next week. Have a great night. Bonne nuit.